Imagine being banned from using the color yellow because your CEO thinks it's ugly, or getting fired because a robot decided you blinked too slowly. No, this isn't some twisted Black Mirror episode. This is the modern workplace. We've dug through lawsuits, leaked memos, and employee horror stories to uncover 50 of the most brain-dead corporate rules that real companies actually enforce on real human beings. From underwear inspections to smile detecting cameras, these policies prove that common sense left the building a long time ago. By the time we're done, you'll either feel incredibly grateful for your current job or immediately start updating your resume. Let's clock in. 1. A Norwegian insurance company once decided that the best way to manage bathroom breaks was to hand out red bracelets to female employees during their menstrual cycles. The idea was that managers could see the bracelet and understand why someone was visiting the restroom more often. Instead of simply trusting grown adults to handle their own biology, they created what can only be described as a period tracking system straight out of a dystopian nightmare. The policy was eventually killed after massive public outrage. But the terrifying part is that multiple people in a boardroom heard this idea and said, yes, this sounds reasonable. Someone typed it up. Someone printed the memo. Someone ordered the bracelets. At no point did a single person raise their hand and ask if maybe, just maybe, this was insane. 2. A British utility company and its engineers from wearing sunglasses while speaking to customers, because apparently eye contact is essential for brand warmth. Never mind that these workers spend their entire day outside, often staring directly into the sun while repairing equipment or digging up roads. The company decided that risking permanent eye damage and squinting uncontrollably was a small price to pay to make sure Mrs. Henderson feels a deep emotional connection with the man reading her electricity meter. It's the kind of rule that sounds professional in a meeting, but completely falls apart the moment you apply it to the actual world, where sunlight exists. 3. A French court had to legally establish that a man had the right to be boring at work. His consulting firm fired him for what they called professional inadequacy because he refused to participate in their so-called fun culture, which allegedly included heavy drinking sessions and humiliating team-building rituals on weekends. The judge ruled that he was hired to be a consultant, not a fraternity pledge, and that being uninterested in forced fun is not a fireable offense. It set an actual legal precedent confirming that you don't have to like your co-workers to be good at your job. Be honest. Would you rather lose your job or be legally required to party with your manager every Friday night? 4. Retail giants like Walmart and GameStop have been known to pressure their minimum wage employees into participating in TikTok dances to make the brand seem fun and relatable online. There is something deeply unsettling about watching a worker who probably can't afford health insurance doing a choreographed routine in the stockroom to help a billion-dollar corporation chase viral clout. It's not team spirit, it's dignity being sacrificed on the altar of algorithmic engagement. The worst part is that if the video flops, no one remembers. But if it goes viral, the company gets millions in free advertising while the employee gets nothing but a sore back and a lingering sense of shame. 5. In the early 1900s, Henry Ford created something called the Ford Sociological Department, which was basically a private army of investigators whose job was to spy on factory workers' personal lives. These inspectors would show up at employees' homes unannounced to check if their houses were clean, if they were drinking alcohol, and if their marriages were stable. If you failed the home inspection, you lost your famous $5 a day wage. Selling your labor wasn't enough. You had to sell your entire private existence to the company. It was corporate surveillance before cameras even existed, and it set a disturbing precedent that companies have been trying to recreate ever since. 6. Hong Kong Airlines made it mandatory for all cabin crew to train in Wing Chun Kung Fu before they were allowed to work on flights. We're not talking about basic self-defense. We're talking about actual traditional martial arts mastered over months of training. The official reason was physical fitness, but the real reason was obvious. They needed flight attendants who could handle drunk and aggressive passengers at 30,000 feet. It transforms your friendly neighborhood flight attendant into a potential action movie star. Next time you think about complaining that your in-flight meal is cold, remember that the person serving it might know exactly how to dislocate your shoulder. 7. A manufacturing plant in Pennsylvania tried to limit employees to exactly 6 minutes of bathroom time per day. If you exceeded that limit, you faced discipline disciplinary action. They installed monitoring systems on bathroom doors to track every second workers spent away from the production line. Imagine having to explain to a grown adult in a suit that you had a stomach ache and are now on probation because of it. The policy treats basic human biology as a production inefficiency rather than an unavoidable part of being alive. Be honest. If your employer tracked your bathroom breaks down to the second, how long would you last before getting written up, Pate? Until 2001, Disney World required employees playing costumed characters to wear company-issued underwear. The problem was that Disney didn't always wash these undergarments properly between shifts, leading to outbreaks of lice and scabies among cast members. Workers were literally sharing unwashed underwear with strangers until the Teamsters Union finally stepped in and fought for the basic human right to wear your own clean undergarments to work. When your employer has to be legally forced to let you wear your own underwear, you know the corporate priorities have gone catastrophically wrong. 9. The CEO of a major IT company called internal emails pollution and tried to ban them entirely. He wanted a zero-email workplace where everyone communicated through instant messaging or face-to-face conversations, while the intention was to reduce digital clutter. The result was complete chaos. People couldn't document decisions, couldn't search for past instructions, and couldn't prove that anyone had agreed to anything. It turns out sometimes you actually need a paper trail. Instead of trusting Dave from accounting when he swears he definitely processed your invoice last Tuesday, the policy was quietly abandoned after productivity tanked and confusion became the default state of the Office. 10. One of the most toxic unwritten rules in corporate culture is the "we are a family" doctrine. It's rarely in the handbook, but it's weaponized constantly to manipulate employees into accepting late nights, weekend work, and lower pay because you wouldn't let your family down, would you? It's a psychological trap designed to make you feel guilty for having boundaries. A job is a transaction. You provide labor, they provide money. If your actual family treated you the way some corporations do, monitoring your bathroom breaks, banning your sunglasses, and timing your lunch down to the second, you would call a therapist immediately. 11. In China, a company called Canon Information Technology installed AI-powered cameras that only allow employees to enter the office or book meeting rooms if they are smiling. They called it smile recognition technology. But let's call it what it really is: mandatory dystopian. Happiness enforced by robots. You could be having the worst day of your life, grieving, sick, or exhausted. But to get to your desk and do the job that pays your rent, you have to grin like a maniac at a machine. It's the digital equivalent of a stranger on the street telling you to smile more. Except this stranger controls your access to income. 12. For years, the sandwich chain Jimmy John's forced its low-wage workers to sign strict non-compete agreements. These contracts legally prevented former employees from working at any business that sold sandwiches within 2 miles of any Jimmy John's location for 2 years after leaving, because apparently the revolutionary technique of putting turkey and lettuce on bread is a high-level corporate secret on par with nuclear launch codes. The company eventually dropped the policy after getting sued, but the sheer arrogance of thinking you can own a teenager's future career in sandwich making. Apple faced a massive class action lawsuit because it required retail employees to submit to mandatory bag checks before leaving the store, but refused to pay them for that time. Workers would clock out and then stand in line for up to 20 minutes while security searched their belongings to make sure they hadn't stolen an iPhone. Apple's defense was that bringing a bag to work was optional, so the wait was the employee's own fault. The California Supreme Court eventually disagreed, ruling that if you control someone's time, you have to pay for it. Even the world's richest company couldn't successfully argue that 20 minutes of forced waiting is somehow not work. 14. Amazon's warehouse algorithms are famously ruthless, but in some facilities, the system that tracks time off task is so aggressive that it automatically generates warnings if a worker stops moving for just a few minutes. The algorithm essentially becomes the manager, firing people via app notification without any human ever reviewing what actually happened. You could be helping a fallen coworker or dealing with an equipment malfunction, but the system doesn't care about context. It only sees that you stopped producing. Be honest. If you knew an AI was tracking every second you weren't actively working, would you survive a single week at your current job? 15. For years, major corporations like Walmart quietly took out life insurance policies on their low-level employees, naming the company itself as the beneficiary. Industry insiders called this dead peasant insurance. If a cashier, janitor, or stock clerk died, their family received nothing. But the corporation collected a massive tax-free payout worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. It literally turns your death into a corporate profit center, creating a twisted incentive structure where your employer might care more about your funeral than your well-being. Does knowing your company might financially benefit from your death make you feel valued? Or does it make you want to run? 16. General Motors once had a dress code that stretched across 10 pages of excruciating detail about exactly what employees could and couldn't wear. When Mary Barra took over as head of HR before eventually becoming CEO, she replaced the entire document with 2 words: dress appropriately. Managers panicked. They allegedly flooded her office with calls asking for specifics, claiming they couldn't possibly trust their teams to figure out what appropriate means. It proved that most corporate rules don't exist because employees are incompetent. They exist because middle managers are terrified of having to actually lead people, instead of hiding behind a rulebook. 17. There's a company in Japan that gives employees a bonus if they marry a co-worker. But here's where it gets interesting. They also offer a divorce bonus if that office romance falls apart. If your workplace relationship ends, the company provides a heartbreak payment to help both parties move out and start over. It sounds generous on the surface, but do you really want your HR department financially involved in your breakup? It creates a bizarre situation where the company has a monetary stake in whether your relationship succeeds or fails, which is a level of corporate involvement in your personal life that nobody asked for. 18. Tesla factory workers were reportedly instructed to avoid using yellow for safety markings because Elon Musk personally didn't like the color, instead of using the universally recognized high-visibility yellow that every safety manual on Earth recommends for industrial environments. Tesla facilities used shades of gray and red to match the aesthetic vision of the factory floor when the physical safety of workers takes a back seat to the CEO's interior design preferences. You know that corporate priorities have officially gone upside down. Looking cool apparently matters more than keeping all your fingers. 19. Bridgewater Associates, one of the world's largest hedge funds, operates on a philosophy called radical transparency. Almost every meeting is recorded, and employees are actively encouraged to brutally criticize each other's ideas at all times. They even maintain an issue log, where you're expected to document your colleagues' mistakes in writing. The company calls it the pursuit of truth. Most normal people would call it a workplace, where you're legally required to be a jerk to your friends. If your company introduced a mandatory snitch on your coworker system tomorrow, who's the first person you'd write up? Be honest. 20. In 2013, a Pennsylvania court ruled that it was completely legal for a company to fire an employee for being too attractive. A dental assistant was let go because her boss, a married dentist, found her irresistible and believed she posed a threat to his marriage. He openly admitted she was a stellar employee with no performance issues, but fired her anyway to save his personal relationship. The all-male state Supreme Court panel ruled this wasn't gender discrimination, but rather a specific issue of the boss's lack of self-control, which apparently is now a valid reason to destroy someone's career. If you're too good at your job and too attractive, you can legally lose both. 20-1. In 2010, the Swiss banking giant UBS released a 44-page dress code that read less like corporate guidelines and more like a controlling obsession. Put into writing, the document explicitly instructed female employees to wear skin-toned underwear so it would remain invisible under their clothes. It banned eating garlic or onions during the work week. It specified the exact shade of lipstick that was required. The bank eventually retracted the guide after global mockery, but for a brief moment in history, UBS managers were technically authorized to inspect their employees' undergarments in the name of Swiss banking standards. 20-2. During the so-called golden age of aviation, Pan Am stewardesses were subjected to mandatory girdle checks before every flight. A supervisor would physically feel the women's bodies to ensure they were wearing the required undergarments to achieve a smooth silhouette in their uniforms. If a stewardess gained as little as 2 pounds, she was grounded without pay until she lost the weight. It was systematic body policing disguised as professionalism, and it was considered completely normal for decades. Women weren't just employees. They were aesthetic products to be inspected before being displayed to the public. 23. Japanese companies are legally required to measure the waistlines of employees between the ages of 40 and 74 once a year under what's known as the Metabo Law. If an employee's waistline exceeds the government-mandated limit, the company faces financial penalties, and the employee is enrolled in mandatory dietary counseling. Imagine your boss walking into your cubicle with a measuring tape and a disappointed expression because you had an extra slice of pizza at lunch. Be honest. If your current employer measured your waistline tomorrow, would you pass the test or be sent to mandatory diet classes? 24. Many Silicon Valley companies now require employees to sign love contracts if they decide to date a co-worker. Before the relationship can proceed, both parties must disclose the situation to HR and sign a legal waiver confirming that the relationship is completely consensual. The goal is to protect the company from potential harassment lawsuits, but the execution feels deeply invasive. Nothing kills romance quite like getting the legal department involved before the third date to confirm that your dinner plans are compliant with Section 4, Paragraph C of the Employee Conduct Handbook. 20-5. A major poultry processing company in the United States was sued because they were deducting money from workers' paychecks for time spent using the bathroom. The production line conditions were so strict that some workers reportedly wore adult diapers to avoid being penalized or fired for stepping away to relieve themselves. When your efficiency model forces grown adults to soil themselves just to keep the chicken nuggets moving at target speed, you've crossed the line from capitalism into something much darker. That's not productivity. 26. That's cruelty. Amazon installed what they called Amazon booths in some of their warehouses. These are tiny, coffin-sized kiosks where stressed workers can sit inside and watch calming videos of nature, scenes for a few minutes, instead of lowering impossible quotas or giving people adequate breaks. The solution was to build a despair closet where you can have your mental breakdown in private while staring at a digital forest. It's a dystopian band-aid slapped onto a gaping wound, proving that corporations will invent literally anything except treating employees like actual human beings. 20-7. Netflix operates on a brutal management philosophy called the Keeper Test. Managers are constantly encouraged to ask themselves a simple question: if this employee told me they were leaving, would I fight hard to keep them? If the answer is no, the employee is fired immediately and given a severance package. It creates a constant Hunger Games atmosphere where being adequate at your job is considered a fireable offense, and everyone is essentially interviewing for their position every single day. Sure, it might drive performance, but living in permanent existential anxiety is a steep price to pay for unlimited streaming content. 28. The trend of unlimited paid time off sounds incredible until you realize it's often a brilliantly designed psychological trap. Studies consistently show that employees with unlimited vacation actually take fewer days off than those with a fixed number. Why? Because without a specific allowance, taking time off becomes a guilt trip where you constantly question whether you're being lazy or taking advantage. Companies removed the rules knowing that people would police themselves into working more. Be honest, does unlimited vacation sound like freedom to you? Or does it sound like a clever way to make you never take a single day off? 29. The state of Iowa once fired an employee for using reply all on an email chain. To be fair, he sent it to 4,000 people, and the message wasn't work-related. But the policy stated that misuse of government resources was grounds for immediate termination. It might be the only documented case where the universal rage everyone feels about unnecessary reply all emails was actually codified into an official firing. Harsh maybe, but anyone who has ever been trapped in a 50-person email thread about about. What to order for the office potluck might secretly agree he got exactly what he deserved. 30. Safeway supermarkets once implemented a superior service initiative requiring all employees to smile and make direct eye contact with every customer they encountered. The policy backfired in spectacular fashion. Male customers frequently interpreted the mandatory friendliness as genuine romantic interest, leading to a massive spike in harassment complaints and even stalking cases. The union eventually had to intervene because female staff were legitimately terrified to walk to their cars after their shifts, forcing a cashier to gaze meaningfully into a stranger's eyes over a carton of milk isn't good customer service. It's a recipe for disaster. 30-1. A train driver for West Japan Railway Company was docked 56 yen, roughly 50 cents, from his paycheck because his train departed 1 minute late. He had briefly gotten confused about which platform to use and had to quickly correct the error, causing a 60-second delay. The company argued that since no labor was performed during that 1 minute, no payment was owed. The driver was so insulted by the pettiness of the deduction that he actually sued the company for emotional distress. Tragically, he passed away before the verdict, but the court eventually ruled in his favor and ordered the company to repay the 56 yen. 32. Abercrombie & Fitch was so obsessed with maintaining its cool kid image that managers reportedly punished employees for minor mistakes by forcing them to do push-ups or squats in the middle of the store. A verbal warning wasn't enough if you folded a shirt wrong. You had to physically exert yourself in front of customers like you were pledging a fraternity instead of working a retail shift. It wasn't a clothing store. It was a bizarre hazing ritual happening in plain sight, just with better lighting and louder music. 30-3. Zappos, the online shoe company, has a legendary policy called the offer. After completing initial training, every new hire is offered their full salary for the time they've worked, plus an additional $2,000 in cash to quit on the spot. The logic is simple. If you're willing to take the money and walk away, you don't have the long-term commitment the company is looking for. It's designed to filter out people who are only there for a paycheck and retain only the true believers. Say what you want about Zappos, but it might be the only company in existence that will literally pay you to leave. 34. In the retail and restaurant industry, there's a scheduling practice so exhausting it has its own name, the clopening. This is when an employee is required to close the store late at night and then return just a few hours later to open it the next morning. We're talking about leaving work at midnight and clocking back in at 5 in the morning. It treats sleep as an optional inconvenience rather than a biological necessity, leaving workers in a permanent state of zombie-like exhaustion just so the coffee shop can be ready for the early rush. Be honest, have you ever worked a clopening shift and did you hallucinate from the lack of sleep? 35. Before legislation started cracking down on the practice, it was becoming disturbingly common for employers to demand job applicants hand over their Facebook usernames and passwords. During interviews, the hiring manager would then log into your private account right in front of you to scroll through your personal messages, photos, and posts to judge whether you were appropriate for the position. It's the digital equivalent of an interviewer asking for your house keys so they can rifle through your bedroom drawers while you sit nervously in the lobby waiting for their verdict. 36. In Japan, thousands of women organized a movement called Kutu, a clever wordplay combining the Japanese words for shoe and pain, to protest corporate rules requiring women to wear high heels in the workplace. This wasn't a casual fashion suggestion. These were strict policies, forcing women to stand for 8 hours a day in footwear specifically designed to be uncomfortable and damaging to their feet, all because some male executive somewhere decided that flat shoes looked unprofessional. It's physical pain mandated by corporate policy and forced in the name of outdated aesthetics. 37. Disney theme park employees are strictly forbidden from pointing at anything with a single finger. If a guest asks for directions, the cast member must gesture using two fingers or an open palm. The official explanation is that pointing with one finger is considered rude in some cultures, but the real origin is far more interesting. Walt Disney was a heavy smoker who always had a cigarette between his fingers, so he naturally pointed with two fingers out of habit. Decades later, thousands of employees are still mimicking the hand gestures of a chain smoker from the 1950s, just without the cigarette. 30-8. After a tragic incident where a young intern died from exhaustion, Goldman Sachs introduced what they called the Saturday Rule. Junior analysts were forbidden from being in the office from 9 p.m. Friday until 9 a.m. Sunday. It sounded like a compassionate reform, but in the cutthroat world of investment banking, the actual workload didn't decrease. It just got violently compressed into the remaining hours. Sunday became a panic-fueled marathon to catch up on everything that wasn't done during the week. It's like telling a drowning person they can't swim on Saturdays, but still demanding they reach the shore by Monday morning. 30-9. An Australian government department once issued a formal memo banning employees from charging their personal phones at work to save on electricity costs. An engineer decided to do the math and found that charging a smartphone for an entire year costs approximately 50 cents in electricity. The memo itself, the management meetings to discuss it, and the administrative time spent enforcing the rule likely cost taxpayers thousands of dollars, far exceeding any possible savings. It's the perfect example of corporate bureaucracy stepping over $1 to pick up a dime. 40. The clean desk policy is a classic example of corporate micromanagement, but some companies take it to an extreme that borders on psychological warfare. Employees are forbidden from leaving any personal items visible on their desks at the end of the day. No family photos, no plants, no coffee mugs, nothing. The goal is supposedly to protect sensitive information, but the result is an office that looks like a sterile furniture catalog where no humans actually exist. If you can't display a picture of your dog at your workstation, are you really working there? Or are you just temporarily occupying space until a robot can do your job? 41. The trucking industry has embraced a level of constant surveillance that would make intelligence agencies jealous. Many companies now install driver-facing cameras equipped with AI that tracks eye movement in real time. If a driver blinks too long, looks away from the road for a fraction of a second, or appears drowsy, an alarm screams in the cabin and an instant report is transmitted to headquarters. Veteran drivers with decades of safe experience are treated like irresponsible teenagers who can't be trusted to look out the windshield. Imagine doing your job with a camera 6 inches from your face, ready to scream at you if you sneeze. Several major warehouse and logistics companies have instituted no-pocket policies. Employees must wear pants without pockets or have their existing pockets sewn permanently shut if you need to carry your car keys, phone, wallet, or personal hygiene items. You're required to use a clear plastic bag that makes everything visible to anyone walking by. The policy assumes that every single employee is a potential criminal until proven otherwise. It creates an atmosphere of distrust where workers are treated as suspects rather than team members from the moment they walk through the door. 40-3. For decades, IBM maintained an official company songbook, and employees were genuinely expected to sing songs praising the corporation at gatherings and events. One anthem called Ever Onward included lyrics celebrating IBM as the greatest institution on the planet. Working there wasn't enough. You had to perform musical tributes to quarterly earnings, like you were participating in some kind of corporate worship service. If your current boss handed you sheet music tomorrow and expected you to sing a heartfelt ballad about your company's mission statement, would you go along with it or walk straight out the door? 44. WeWork, the co-working startup that spectacularly collapsed, once banned employees from expensing any meals that contained meat. The co-founder justified the policy as an environmental initiative, but effectively it forced thousands of employees worldwide to follow his personal dietary preferences whether they agreed or not. The rules were absurdly inconsistent. You could expense 5 lobsters for dinner and nobody would blink, but a cheeseburger was grounds for rejection. When a CEO uses corporate policy to dictate what employees are allowed to eat, the line between leadership and personal ego trip has been completely obliterated. 40-5. A growing trend in the United States involves something called training. Repayment agreement provisions, which critics have nicknamed traps. Companies hire workers for relatively low-wage positions, provide them with basic training, and then make them sign contracts stating that if they quit before a set period, usually 2 years, they owe the company thousands of dollars to cover the cost of that training. It functions as modern indentured servitude. Workers become trapped in jobs they hate because they can't afford the debt they'd incur by leaving. It's a financial cage disguised as professional development. 40-6. Many corporate offices maintain strict, sometimes written policies banning employees from microwaving popcorn in the break room. While it sounds petty and ridiculous, this is actually the one rule on this entire list that might be completely justified. A single burnt bag of popcorn can trigger fire alarms, evacuate an entire building, and leave the office smelling like chemical regret for 3 full days. It's the rare instance where corporate tyranny and the common good are perfectly aligned. Some rules exist for a reason, and this is one of them. 40-7. For nearly an entire century, UPS maintained a strict policy banning drivers from growing beards. Mustaches were technically permitted, but they couldn't extend past the corners of the mouth. The company didn't relax these rules to allow beards in natural hairstyles until 2020. For decades, your ability to competently deliver packages to people's doorsteps was apparently connected to how smooth your chin was. It's a perfect example of how corporate tradition is often just a fancy term for old habits that nobody ever bothered to question. 40-8. There's a major retail chain in the United States that strictly forbids cashiers from ever sitting down during their shifts. The unofficial motto is, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. Meanwhile, their counterparts in European stores sit comfortably in ergonomic chairs performing the exact same job with no decrease in efficiency. Your ability to scan a barcode isn't actually powered by standing until your feet go numb. It's a power trip disguised as productivity, ensuring that employees are physically exhausted not from the demands of the work itself, but from fighting gravity for 8 hours straight. 40-9. A call center in Norway required employees to use electronic key cards to access the bathrooms. The system logged exactly when each person entered and exited. Managers received daily reports flagging employees who were deemed excessive bathroom users. It transforms the most basic, unavoidable human function into a performance metric that gets analyzed in spreadsheets. When you're sitting in a meeting, reviewing data on how long Susan takes to use the restroom, you have completely lost the plot as a business leader. Some things were never meant to be measured. All right, we've covered 49 absolute nightmares of corporate logic, and there's just one left. But before we reveal number 50, it's time for the final verdict. We've witnessed smile detecting, robots, mandatory underwear inspections, bathroom surveillance systems, and companies literally profiting from their employees' deaths. But if we had to crown a single winner for the most insane rule, the award goes to number 15, Dead Peasant Insurance. The fact that a corporation can legally take out a life insurance policy on you, collect hundreds of thousands of dollars when you die, and leave your family with nothing is the ultimate proof that some companies view human beings as nothing more than assets to be monetized. But maybe you disagree. Maybe the period bracelets disturbed you more, or the 6-minute bathroom limit. Let us know in the comments which rule made you angriest. And now, our final entry. 50. In China, many major tech companies operate under an unwritten but strictly enforced schedule known as 996. That means working from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, 6 days a week. That's 72 hours per week as the baseline expectation. Billionaire Jack Ma famously called this schedule a huge blessing, claiming young workers should feel grateful for the opportunity to prove their dedication through exhaustion. It's not just a workplace policy, it's a lifestyle demand that says your youth, your health, your relationships, and your personal existence all belong to the company. Sleep isn't rest, it's just weakness leaving the body. When the richest people in the world tell you that working yourself to death is a privilege, you realize the system was never designed with your well-being in mind. So we've survived 50 examples of corporate insanity together. But now I want to hear about you. What do you actually do for a living? Do you love your job? Or are you just counting down the seconds until you can finally clock out? Drop your answer in the comments. If this video made you feel even slightly better about your own workplace, smash that like button. And if you want to see more content like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next video.